Hello.
So in this presentation, I'm going to be covering base jumping. Quite a few people have heard of it, but not a lot of people know exactly what it is. So, first things first, what is base jumping? Well, base jumping, simply put, is the act of parachuting or wingsuit flying from a fixed structure or cliff, as opposed to regular skydiving, which is usually done from a plane, a hot air balloon, helicopter, something that can fly and move around a lot. Base jumping is always done from a fixed structure. Base itself, the base part of base jumping, is an acronym. Not a lot of people know that. It just classifies the types of objects you can jump off of. We'll get into that in a moment. And unlike skydiving, base jumping is not regulated. So with regular skydiving, any jump center you go to is federally regulated and has several rules it has to follow. With base jumping, anyone with a parachute can base jump. Maybe not well, but they can definitely give it a shot. So, what does that acronym BASE stand for? Well, it classifies all the areas and objects you can jump off of. So BASE, the B, stands for building. Pretty straightforward, and any building tall enough to open your parachute, you can jump off of. A stands for antenna, so like a cell tower or just any kind of large antenna structure that goes straight up, usually is tall enough to jump from. S, it stands for spans, or otherwise known as bridges. The acronym was invented by a British person, so they call it spans over there. And then the last one, E, is earth. So any cliff, mountain, anything, just the ground that's tall enough to jump off of. So that's the acronym. What kind of equipment do you need to jump? You need some pretty basic stuff. As far as the most basic equipment needs, you need one fast opening parachute, and that's it. You don't get a reserve chute like skydiving. You also need a specially designed parachute pack meant for quick release and quick opening, so you can do it in a fraction of a second. And then this is sort of optional, but sort of not, would be a helmet. Because of what you're jumping off of, usually cliffs and buildings, you're going to be so close to it that if your parachute opens slightly wrong, you might get turned around and go right into the building itself, so you want the helmet to protect yourself. It's just for basic safety. Now, as far as optional equipment, there is also the wingsuit. A lot of you guys have seen it. It transfers your direct downward momentum into forward momentum. So you're still falling, but at a much reduced rate, and flying forward while you do it. Very few people do it, and it's even more dangerous than regular skydiving, or regular base jumping, rather. And then lastly would be some other protective gear. As you can see, this girl is wearing an extra pair of knee pads and shin guards. Once again, you just might run into stuff. You never know. You want to be extra safe. So, what's the risk of it? I mentioned earlier it's one of the most dangerous extreme sports in the world. And just basically the main risk is that it's from such a low elevation, usually not more than a couple hundred feet, that you have no time to have any kind of reserve parachute. So you have the one chute, and it only has really one chance to work. The other risk is, as I mentioned with the helmets, the potential to impact the structure you just jumped from. So if you jump, your air parachute opens a little bit wrong, it might spin you back into the building, the bridge, whatever. So that's the other risk, is that you can just smack right into the side of a building, and it's hard to recover from that. And with it being such a small margin of error, it's one of the most dangerous extreme sports in the world, often ranked as the most dangerous. The small margin for error is you may only have a few seconds per jump to actually activate your parachute and descend to safety. So you only get the one chance, and you only have a few seconds to do it. And compared to regular skydiving, this has a fatality or injury risk 43 times higher. That's pretty high. And skydiving is already not known as the safest sport. So, just how dangerous is it? How many people do it? So only about 20,000 people have really base jumped over their lives. There's not a lot. There's maybe a couple thousand active at any moment. So this graph here just shows the likelihood of a fatality per jump. So you can see skydiving is at about 4%, cycling, which surprised me, is about 5%, skiing is around 2%, but base jumping is around 11% fatality rate per jump or so. So it's roughly one fatality every 2,317 jumps. So this chart is basically how many people versus how often the fatality happens. So there's one fatality every 2,317 jumps. That's not a lot of jumps. And then nearly 1 in every 254 jumps results in a non-fatal injury. So if you have 250 people jumping in a row, one of them is going to get hurt. And that's pretty much the statistics by it. Now the last question is this sport even legal? As I mentioned earlier, skydiving is regulated, base jumping is not. So due to the very high risk, most countries have outlawed the sport in general. So if you get caught doing it, you're getting a big hefty fine or being sent to jail. Base jumping is also illegal in almost every major American city and national park. Almost. But because it is so popular and people are going to do it, there are special events held just around the world where you can gather a whole bunch of people in one day and have one day of jumping, and it'd be perfectly legal. The most common one is known as Bridge Day in West Virginia, where several hundred people come out to the Perrin Bridge over the New Valley Gorge and just jump from the bridge all day long. So now, finally got a little video here for you, just showing off what base jumping actually looks like. This one's from a clip. So as you can see, the cliff they're jumping from is not very high at all. Most of them are pulling their chute right away, otherwise they won't really have a chance. Let's see, a couple guys can get fancy, do a couple flips along the way, but you don't have much time for anything else. There we go. And that is base jumping.